And now to our major story tonight. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is having it tough. Today, the residence of the Commission's acting chairman, Ibrahim Magu, was attacked. Magu was unhurt, but a policeman was killed during the attack. The Commission says there is cause to be anxious over the fight against corruption. Still talking about the EFCC, this week, a ruling of the Lagos Division of the Court of Appeal held that the agency lacked the powers to investigate or prosecute serving judicial officers except where such officers have been dismissed by the National Judicial Council, the NJC. The FCC says it will appeal the ruling. The Commission considers the ruling a dangerous precedent that has no basis in law and is confident that the Supreme Court will upturn the judgment. Let's get perspectives to it now. And I have one of our regular analysts, a friend of the house, tonight on the program, a lawyer, Mr. Jiti Ogunye. He will give us an opening statement on this issue, then we go on the break. Mr. Ogunye, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Pleasure.
Just in about a few seconds. This particular issue, does it mean that there is going to be immunity for judicial officials?
It appears so. What the Court of Appeal Lagos Division, with profound respect to the justices of the Court of Appeal, seem to have done is to enlarge the concept of judicial immunity for judges beyond civil liability.
Okay, Mr. Ogunye, I would like to pause you for a moment. That's the opening word there. Don't go anywhere, everyone. We'll dig to the bottom of this matter and you get clarity on these issues when we come back from this break. Join us again. Many thanks for staying with us, everyone. Well, let's get back to the discussion of the day. We've been talking about Nigeria's anti-graft war and pinning it down to a ruling that says EFCC lacks powers to prosecute serving judges. Well, the appellate court's decision came after a suit instituted by the EFCC against Justice Ngajuwa, a judge of the Bayelsa Division of the Federal High Court, who was accused of unlawfully receiving $260,000 and 8.6 million naira monies that were beyond his emoluments as a judicial officer between 2013 and 2015. Some people will say the implication of this judgment is that there will be some immunity for judicial officers, that the NJC will be the only body that can punish, that if you want to even punish or prosecute or investigate, that the NJC must have come into the matter. That's what gets our attention today. It will change the scheme of things in the anti-corruption war. Don't forget the Buhari-led government also went for some judges who were perceived as corrupt judges. Well, where does this leave us as a country? Mr. Jiti Ogunye, a lawyer and a friend of the house here, has been giving us insight into this matter. Mr. Ogunye, you were talking to us about the implication. Beyond what we can see on the surface, the EFCC says they will appeal this case. But where does this leave the anti-corruption war?
Well, first, before we start talking about the implications, let's discuss what the judgment is all about, what the judgment decided. The judgment decided that the EFCC was wrong in filing a charge against Justice Ngajuwa in the Lagos Division of in the Lagos High Court in respect of the 14 count charge that it brought against him. And why the court so decided, the Court of Appeal so decided, was that the EFCC didn't allow the National Judicial Council to first possibly strip the judge of his judgeship before moving against him. In other words, the court decided that before any serving judge could be charged to court or could be investigated in respect of any criminal allegation which may border on misconduct, the National Judicial Council first must have exercised its powers under Section 153, 158 of the Constitution, possibly Section 292, which guarantees security of tenure of judicial officers and paragraph 21 of part 1 of the 3rd schedule, which stipulates the disciplinary powers exercisable by the National Judicial Council in respect of judicial officers. In other words, the court held that as a condition precedent to filing criminal charges or to even conducting any criminal investigation in respect of any serving judge, the NJC must have exercised disciplinary powers over that judge and remove him from the bench before it could be proceeded against. Now, where in the Constitution or in any of our laws do we have any provision supporting that decision? There is none. Quite frankly, there is none. And that's why it is my view, with respect to the judges of the Court of Appeal, that this decision is not a decision that can be supported by what our law is currently.
But the question, Mr. Ogunye, is, don't you also think that if there is no sort of protection for the judicial officers when they are in the sacred chambers or when they are in the sacred environment of their work, that means it's going to be a mess. There's going to be the house pulled down on their heads.
No. We have all sorts of immunity. You have diplomatic immunity, you have sovereign immunity, you have legislative immunity, you have executive immunity, which is provided for under Section 308 of the Constitution in respect of those 3 executive offices, i.e. the President, Vice President, Governor, Deputy Governor. You have judicial immunity. Judicial immunity is that immunity that is granted to a judge is an immunity from civil liability in respect of the discharge of the functions of that judge, in respect of the performance of his office. In other words, for example, a judge may not be sued by anybody for misjudging a case, for wasting time on a case, for any order that is given or anything is said in the course of discharging his judicial function. So it's not answerable for any civil liability. It cannot be held liable.
When he sits on the bench at that moment.
But that's judicial immunity for you. What this judgment seems to have done is to enlarge that scope to now include criminal culpability, meaning that the court has now held that the anti-corruption agencies in the executive branch of government cannot perform their statutory function except the National Judicial Council act in respect of any judge that may be facing any criminal accusation or allegation. Now, there is no part of our Constitution that supports that. Section 158 of the Constitution, which grants independence in the conduct of administrative proceedings to the executive bodies that are named under Section 153, NJC, Independent National Electoral Commission, Federal Judicial Service Commission, and only relates to the exercise of their powers. That in the exercise of their power, you can't interfere in it. In other words, for example, since the NJC handles disciplinary matters concerning judges or the issue of appointment of judges, you can't interfere to teleguide them on how they should exercise their powers. It has nothing to do with any criminal allegation a judge may be facing.
No, but the question now is, can't we trust the NJC, for example, to perform its duties? It seems to me it's one of the implications of this ruling that, for example, we saw a judge who said he voluntarily retired from service, but the NJC came out to say, look, we ask you to go because of some of the cases on your neck. Can't we trust the NJC in this sense? It looks to me that is the premise that this ruling is given. That the NJC, which has the administrative role of punishing judicial officers, should be given that role before any agency like the FCC can come in.
It's not about whether you can trust an agency or not, or a body or not. It is whether that body has been vested with the powers
by law
to act in the manner that is being suggested, or in a manner that it's been declared by the Court of Appeal that it has to act. So it's not a question of whether you trust a body or not. If the NJC has been given the power to first and foremost deal with all sorts of cases concerning judicial, in particular criminal allegations against them, before the executive branch of government can move. And in any case, and this is very important, what the judgment seems to have done to me, because I've looked at it, administrative law is a year 2 course in our university, and it's so basic, is that there is an attempt to usurp the powers of the executive. You know, we used to complain about usurpation of the power of the judiciary because the execution of all laws is the duty of the executive under Section 5 of the Constitution. Now, when you then say that the executive branch of government cannot execute criminal laws without waiting for the National Judicial Council, you are usurping the powers of the executive, and that's not supported by.
I guess that's a conversation that we will have to push on to get to the bottom of the matter. Always a pleasure having you, Mr. Jiti Ogunye, and we'll see how this all pans out, because the FCC said they are going to the Supreme Court. That's how we leave it tonight. Many thanks everyone for being part of the show. I'm Sean Okimale. Bye for now.